I'm making this video because there are many Messianic members, groups of people who loved to defend Paul despite all his outrageous, blasphemous statements against the Torah, which I'm going to quote the absolute worst statements that he ever made that leave no question what his intent was. Not only this, because obviously this is not enough, because there's some Messianic groups that say, no, you Jews, I know that you get offended by this, but you just don't understand. You got to read the book of Peter, because Peter says you just don't understand. No. The truth is, the original followers of Yeshua, who were called the Nazarenes and later the Ebionites, all labeled Paul as a liar and a heretic and a traitor, I quote, a traitor to the Torah. This is proven by the church fathers up until the 4th century. Even the Roman Catholic church fathers testified that the Jerusalem group who kept the Torah all accused Paul of being a liar and a heretic and a traitor against the Torah. Now, where would they ever come up with an idea like that? They all just don't understand that Paul was a Torah observant dude? No. We have absolute testimony. The church father says there's these heretic group in Jerusalem who keep the Torah, who believe that Jesus was only a man and he was not born of a virgin. They all keep the Torah. They're very weird. They are just so Jewish in their lifestyle. They hate Paul. They can't stand him. They call him a traitor to the Torah. And we, the Catholic Church, support Paul. We have two sides here. This is history and fact. So those Messianics who want to insist that Paul was a good guy and he was so Torah observant, we just can't understand, this is not true. Me and my brother, a very dear brother of mine, we have actually went through the whole book of Romans together and many other of his books of Paul very carefully. Because Romans is one of the books that is used most to defend this heretic liar. Even in that book, we found that we punctured holes through his entire thesis and his cleverness and nonsense rhetoric that he was proposing in Romans. We got through all the nonsense and saw exactly what it was for what he was trying to speak, cutting through all the BS, getting to the point. And it's very clear that Romans is just another way to dance around the fact that he was not Torah observant and he was trying to convince other Jews to follow his lead as well. Let's begin with the passages that are very clear. I don't care what people say or what they try to do to defend him. These passages are brutally clear. There's no way around this. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13. In speaking of the new covenant, now remember, Hebrews, we're not sure if Paul wrote it, but many scholars suggest that it's very Pauline in theology. Controversial, nonetheless. We'll say it. In speaking of a new covenant, he treats the first as obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. Out with the old, in with the new. It's right there. Galatians. One of the 7 absolute letters of Paul. Galatians chapter 3, verses 24 through 25. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. So the law was our schoolmasters, like training wheels on a bike, to bring us to the Christ, that we might be justified by faith. But after that faith has come, we are no longer under the schoolmaster. We get rid of the training wheels. That's what he's trying to say here. Romans chapter 7, verse 6. But now we are delivered from the law, that being dead where we were held, that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. Oldness of the letter. Yeah, it sounds real Torah observant. But if you are led of the Spirit, you are not under the law. Period. Now, how do Messianic groups deal with this passage? They'll say, no, you just don't understand. He means you have to have the Spirit to keep the Torah. You just can't keep the Torah No, that's not what he's saying. It's very clear that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. He is mocking the actual letters of the Torah. There is no way around this. Now, you can insist that there is, but there is not. He is mocking the words of Elohim. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 15. Having abolished in his flesh the ordinance, even the Torah of commandments. Colossians chapter 2, verse 14. Paul speaks about blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, that was contrary to us. That's like putting white out over words that God wrote. They were against us, contrary to us. Colossians chapter 2, verse 20. So if you are dead with Christ from the vanity of the world, why, as though living in the world, are you chained to orders? Listen carefully. Why are you chained to orders? That's the Torah. You can't dance around this. It's very clear. Galatians 5, verse 2. Behold, I, Paul, say to you that if you get circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. I thought he was a Torah observant dude. I want to hear your comments. How do you say that he was a Torah observant dude if he's saying if you get circumcised, Christ, that's part of the Torah. That's part of the Torah. You must be circumcised. So why is he saying if you get, not if you are, if you get, pay attention. If you get circumcised, Christ will give you nothing. You get no candy bar. No reward. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20. He openly admits that he's a hypocrite, liar, snake, just like the claims of the Nazarenes and Ebionites, of the real Jesus movement, the real disciples. Hated his guts, couldn't stand him. Look what he says. A hypocrite and a deceiver in the highest meaning. To the Jew I became as a Jew in order to convert the Jews. Listen up, Messianics, those who say, oh no, Paul was a Torah observant. You just don't understand. You just don't understand his writings. This is very clear. This is from the hand of Paul. His own letters, his own words. He's telling you who he is. To the Jew I became as a Jew in order to convert the Jews. To those under the law as one under the law. Why would he say this? Why would he say I became as one under the law? He should say after this, though I myself am under the law, but I have to present myself this way. No, he doesn't say that. He says, even though I myself am not under the law. This would have been a great passage to defend your claim that he's such a Torah observant dude. He doesn't say that. He says, though I myself, he's telling you, he's saying, look guys, you guys are defending me? No. I myself am not under the law in order to convert those under the law. Clear as day. He showed you all his cards. Galatians chapter 5, verse 4. You are separated from Christ, you who are trying to be called righteous under the Torah. You have fallen away from his undeserved kindness. Hebrews chapter 7, verses 18 through 19. So then the former law was put aside. Why was it put aside? Because it was weak and useless. For the Torah made nothing perfect. Now, I just cannot understand how some Messianic groups will dare say that this guy was pro-Torah. When I just read to you already, it's over. Over and over and over. He gives you explicit statements that are just complete destruction for the claims that you guys make for him. You just don't understand Paul. You just can't understand him. You need to read 1 Peter. No, I don't need to read 1 Peter. 1 Peter was written way after Peter died. Do you even know when 1 Peter was written? It was written from the year 90 to 110. They don't even know. It's late, way after Jesus' death. He would have been 90, 100 years old. You think he was writing at 90 or 100 years old? Do you know how long people lived in the ancient world? You know what was the maximum lifespan at that time? 30 to 40 years. You're telling me he was 90 to 100 years old writing this letter just so that we Jews can read that letter and say, oh, of course, we just couldn't understand it. We don't know what he's talking about. Yet everything he writes is absolutely clear. There's nothing. The only thing that he's going on with rhetoric that's confusing is Romans a little bit. But we got through that, me and my brother. We went through Romans and saw that it was very clear. There's no, he plays a lot of games, word games in Romans. But once you get into it real deep, you see that it's very penetrable. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, Christ brought us to free us from the curse of the law. Isn't that nice? Romans chapter 6, verse 14, for sin will not dominate over you, for you are not under the law, but under grace. What did Paul think about the Torah in general? If those verses weren't clear, there's one passage that, without a doubt, is the most offensive, obscene statements ever written about the Torah. Philippians chapter 3, verse 8. What is more, I consider everything, meaning the whole Torah, a loss because of surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake have I lost all things. I consider them all as worthless. That's the Torah. His whole life of the Torah. Everything to do with the Torah. It's all as worthless as excrement. Feces. You think I'm joking? Look it up for yourself. That's the most disgusting statement I've ever read in my entire life. And Paul says this about the Torah. Now, why would a pro Torah dude ever say this? What is the point of saying the whole Torah is as worthless as excrement? I would love to hear the excuse for that passage. Don't give me your opinion. Answer these verses and you tell me why you still think that Paul was pro Torah. This is a video to the Messianic members of Christianity who defend Paul and dare to say that this guy was pro-Torah. You just don't understand. You think he was against the law, but he really wasn't. Like I said before, it's very clear with historical sources, meaning the actual disciples and the Jewish followers of Jesus in Jerusalem all protested that Paul was a liar, a heretic, and a traitor to the Torah, against the Torah, and taught against the Torah. What did Paul say about the disciples, the Jerusalem church? He actually talks about the disciples in a very obscene way throughout his writings. Yes, he mocks the disciples, the real followers in Jerusalem, many times. He's always warning. He has to warn his followers, the Gentile followers. He warns them. He says, don't listen to those teachers of another gospel. For example, Philippians chapter 3, verses 2 through 4. And then 8 through 9. He says, watch out for those dogs, those evildoers, those mutilators of the flesh. For it is we who are of the circumcision, we who serve God by his Spirit, who boast in Jesus Christ and put no confidence in the flesh. Though I myself have reason for such confidence, if someone else thinks they have reason to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. He's basically comparing himself. I got more than they do. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 4 through 5. Listen to this. Listen to this. He is answering the Jerusalem church, the followers of Jesus. Listen. For if someone comes to you and preaches a Jesus other than the Jesus we preached, or if you receive a different spirit from the spirit you received, or a different gospel, what is he talking about? The Ebionites were known for having only the Hebrew version Gospel of Matthew and nothing else. You think Paul had a Hebrew version of Matthew? Absolutely not. A different gospel than the one you've accepted. You put up with it easily enough. I do not think I am inferior to those super apostles. He mocks them. I do not think I'm inferior to those super apostles. He does not think that they're super apostles, but he mocks them. He calls them rival teachers sometimes, and mockingly sometimes super apostles. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 22. Again, mocking the disciples. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. Titus chapter 1, verse 10 and verse 14. The real followers of Jesus, he's speaking about them. For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially them of the circumcision. Now, I thought he was Torah observant. Isn't he circumcision? Part of the circumcision? Torah observant? Pay attention. Please wake up. Whose mouths must be stopped, who disturb whole households, teaching things they ought not teach for their own gain. Do not listen to Jewish fables and commandments of men. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 11, 12, and 16. He tells you all about himself again. I have made a fool of myself, but you drove me to it. He's speaking to his own followers, the Gentiles. You drove me to it. I ought to have been commended by you, for I am not inferior to those super apostles. Even though I am nothing, I persevered in demonstrating among you the marks of a true apostle, including signs, wonders, and miracles. Be that as it may, I have not been a burden to you. Yet crafty fellow that I am, I caught you by trickery. Isn't that interesting? I caught you by trickery. Whatever. Galatians chapter 1, verses 6 through 9. I am stunned. He's speaking to his followers again. I am stunned that you are so quickly abandoning him who called you in the grace of Christ, and you are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. Now, who is he talking about? Who else was preaching another gospel? These are other Christians. And he mentions very clearly they are of the circumcision. Are they Israelites? So am I. We know what he taught. He was teaching the Gentiles that it's all about faith, not the Torah. So he's speaking about the Jewish followers, the disciples. James, who led the movement for 30 years. Look it up. Don't believe a word that I say. James was the leader of the Jewish followers. The brother of Jesus was the leader of the followers for 30 years after Jesus died. It was not Paul. Paul did not take over diddly squat after Jesus died. He didn't take over. Peter was not the rock that built the church. No, it was James. James. That's what the historical sources say and the church fathers acknowledge. But if we or an angel from heaven, even an angel from heaven, should preach to you another gospel contrary to the one that was preached to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. He's warning his disciples, his followers, don't listen to another gospel or teachings from this rival group. these super apostles, these rival teachers. Galatians chapter 2 verse 6, those who seemed important had nothing to add to me. He's talking about the disciples. And if you read it in context, it's exactly what he's talking about. Meeting with the disciples in Jerusalem. Galatians chapter 5 verses 10 and verse 12. I am trusting the Lord to keep you from believing false teachings. God will judge that person, whoever he is, who has been confusing you. I just wish that those troublemakers who want to mutilate you by circumcision would mutilate themselves. Wishes the knife would slip and they would just castrate themselves. That's how much he can't stand the Torah and Torah observance. So do your research. Look up the Nazarenes, the Ebionites. If you want to know what the real followers, they were called the Ebionites by the church fathers. They were well known up until the 4th century when they were actually wiped out. And Paul's movement won the day. That's the Roman Catholic Church was birthed from Paul's heretical faith alone teachings. He was not pro Torah, or his church would have been built on the foundation of Torah. This is complete nonsense, and the Messianic cult members who try to bag Paul as a Torah observant dude, super Torah observant, you don't understand him. No, you don't understand nothing. If he was so Torah observant, then the church would have been built on his teachings of being pro-Torah observant. You wouldn't have hundreds of years of the Middle Ages where the dominant and only force was the Catholic Church based on Paul's teachings. They loved Paul. And the Jerusalem church, led by James, those teachings of the original Yeshua died and disappeared in history. This is fact. This is reality. And what you believe about Paul, because you don't want to rip his books out of your New Testament, is just nonsense. It's not reality. So do your research. Look into these things. This is the actual truth, historical truth. And it's based on his own writings. It's very clear. Paul was not Torah observant. He was a fraud. He was a liar. And against God Almighty. Shalom.